Welcome to Episode 3 of Candid Classroom. Today, we're starting with a look at the policy shifts under the Trump administration and how they brought charter schools to the forefront of education reform. These shifts highlighted a significant emphasis on school choice and market-driven solutions, making the discussion of charter schools both timely and relevant. The Trump administration prioritized expanding school choice, including a strong focus on charter schools. This shift marked a departure from previous policies, bringing both opportunities and challenges. The administration proposed initiatives like the Education Freedom Scholarships, which aim to use federal tax credits to support private school tuition and charter school expansion. Federal funding policies encouraged growth in charter schools, framing them as vehicles for innovation and choice. Policies under the administration reduced federal oversight, granting charter schools greater autonomy. Proponents saw this as an opportunity for innovation, while critics warned of weakened accountability. Proposals to redirect Title I funds, meant for low-income public schools, toward school choice initiatives, including charter schools, sparked intense debate about equity and resource allocation. The market-driven approach under the administration bolstered for-profit charter management organizations, intensifying concerns about prioritizing financial gain over educational quality. Charter schools are publicly funded schools that operate independently of the traditional public school system. They are established through a charter, a performance contract, that details the school's mission, program, and methods of assessment. In exchange for this autonomy, they are held accountable for academic and financial outcomes. Charter schools can be managed by nonprofit organizations, for-profit entities, or even community groups. Unlike traditional public schools, they often have more flexibility in curriculum design, staffing, and school culture. Proponents of charter schools highlight their potential for increased innovation, often serving as incubators for new teaching methods and educational approaches. Their autonomy allows them to experiment with specialized curricula or focus areas such as STEM, the arts, or bilingual education. For example, a 2016 study by Mathematica Policy Research found that charter schools focusing on personalized learning approaches achieved greater academic growth compared to traditional public schools. Families also benefit from having the option to select a school that aligns with their child's needs, learning style, or interests, leading to higher satisfaction and engagement. Surveys conducted by Education Next show that 60% of parents prefer the ability to choose among various educational options, including charter schools, citing tailored programs as a primary reason. Additionally, research from the Center for Research on Education Outcomes at Stanford University reported that charter school students in major cities often outperform their peers in traditional public schools in math and reading. A 2020 report by the Urban Institute highlighted that Black students attending charter schools in Chicago gained an additional 40 instructional days in math per year compared to their peers in traditional public schools. Unlike traditional schools, charter schools face closure if they fail to meet the goals outlined in their charters. Proponents argue this creates a higher standard of accountability. For instance, in New Orleans, where the majority of public schools are now charters, a strict accountability framework led to significant improvements in graduation rates and test scores post-Hurricane Katrina. Critics of charter schools raise significant concerns. Equity issues are frequently cited, as some charter schools may cherry-pick students or discourage enrollment of those with special needs, English language learners, or students requiring significant support. A 2018 Government Accountability Office report found that charter schools enroll fewer students with disabilities than traditional public schools, raising concerns about equitable access. By diverting funding from traditional public schools, charter schools constrain resources for the majority of students who remain in the public system. A 2021 study from the National Education Policy Center estimated that districts with high charter school penetration lose 10 to 15% of their per-pupil funding, exacerbating resource disparities. The question of how charter schools perform on average has been a subject of considerable research. In 2013, the Center for Research on Education Outcomes at Stanford University found that 25% of charter schools outperformed local public schools in math and reading, 31% performed worse in math, and 19% performed worse in reading. In 2023, the same center reported that the average charter school student experienced the equivalent of 6 additional days of learning in math and 16 days in reading compared to traditional public school peers. Additionally, a 2020 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research highlighted that urban charter schools, particularly nonprofit ones, tend to boost student achievement more significantly than traditional public schools in similar contexts. These findings emphasize the wide variability in charter school performance, often influenced by factors like location, management type, and demographics. The involvement of for-profit companies in charter school management raises concerns about prioritizing financial gain over educational quality. States like Michigan, where 80% of charter schools are run by for-profit organizations, have faced criticism for poor oversight and limited academic improvements. One of the most contentious debates surrounding charter schools centers on the use of market forces to drive school improvement versus the ethical concerns that arise from this approach. Proponents of charter schools argue that introducing competition into the education system can lead to better outcomes. By allowing families to vote with their feet, schools are incentivized to improve quality, innovate, and respond to student needs. A study by Harvard University found that public schools located near high-performing charter schools tend to improve due to the competitive pressure. The presence of charters encourages traditional schools to adopt innovative practices to retain students. Operating under a model of school choice, charter schools are believed to allocate resources more efficiently. Parents select schools they perceive as the best fit for their children, leading to a reallocation of funds toward higher-performing institutions. However, critics contend that education is a public good, not a market commodity, and applying market principles can create ethical dilemmas. Competition can inadvertently leave behind the most vulnerable students. A 2019 study by the Economic Policy Institute found that charter schools often serve fewer students with disabilities and English language learners, raising concerns about systemic inequities. For-profit charter management organizations face scrutiny for prioritizing financial outcomes over student success. The ethical implications of profiting from taxpayer-funded education remain a key concern for opponents. Additionally, when funding follows students to charter schools, traditional public schools, particularly in low-income areas, may experience resource shortages. Critics argue this undermines the mission of providing equitable education for all. Charter school policies vary widely across states. Some states cap the number of charter schools allowed, while others provide robust support for their expansion. Federal funding for charter schools has also been a point of contention, with debates about the balance between supporting innovation and ensuring accountability. Massachusetts has a rigorous approval process for charter schools, focusing on high performance, while Arizona's more lenient policies have led to rapid growth but also raised accountability questions. According to the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools, over 3.7 million students in the U.S. attend charter schools, accounting for about 7% of all public school students. The data shows that while urban charter schools often demonstrate gains, rural charters tend to lag. Success rates vary widely, with a notable impact in cities where underserved students benefit the most. A study from the Economic Policy Institute suggests that charter schools can divert significant resources from traditional public schools, particularly in districts with declining enrollment. Teacher turnover rates are often higher in charter schools than in traditional public schools, potentially impacting student outcomes. Higher teacher turnover in charter schools can disrupt learning continuity and negatively affect student outcomes. Research from the Learning Policy Institute found that high turnover rates are associated with lower student achievement, particularly in schools serving low-income and minority students. Turnover also increases recruitment and training costs, potentially diverting funds from classroom resources. Additionally, frequent staffing changes can hinder the development of stable school cultures and long-term instructional strategies, which are crucial for student success. Critics of charter schools often highlight the lack of transparency and uneven accountability. Proponents respond by pointing out that many traditional public schools also face challenges with transparency and accountability, yet are not subjected to closure for poor performance. On the topic of funding, charter advocates argue that funding follows the student, and traditional public schools must adapt to changing enrollment patterns by addressing inefficiencies. Some education economists suggest that charter schools' financial impact could be mitigated through state policies that provide transitional funding to districts experiencing enrollment shifts. The future of charter schools will likely hinge on the broader education policy landscape. Policymakers must balance the need for innovation and choice with the imperative to ensure equity and sustainability for the entire public education system. Hybrid charter models, which blend online and in-person learning, are gaining traction and may redefine the charter landscape in a post-pandemic world. Thank you for joining us for Episode 3 of Candid Classroom. What are your thoughts on charter schools? Are they a pathway to innovation, or do they pose risks to educational equity? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more nuanced discussions on education policy, and above all, stay candid.